Hey guys, it's Sign here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're doing another manga review. Today we're looking at Choujin X, which is a series by Sui Ishida. It's published by Viz under their SIG line. It's technically like a Shonen Jump title, but not exactly. Here's the first two books because the first arc is covered in all of Volume 1 and about a third or a quarter of Volume 2. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. The demographic for this series is seinen. The genre is supernatural. It has elements of urban fantasy to it and, of course, action. It's a bit more like a paranormal, style for, an X-Men type story. And what I mean by that is that it's basically the same as X-Men, right? Characters have powers. It's something about their blood or about their genetics that changes them. But they have to have an infusion of some thing in order for that to happen. So I guess they're more like Inhumans than they are X-Men, right? But it's a bunch of different teenagers and adults who all have these powers, who are kind of struggling with each other and also trying to either protect humanity or overthrow it, right? Very much like the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, right? And the veneer of it, or the way that it presents itself, because X-Men presents itself very much as science-based kind of situation. I would say that the Choujin characters all mostly present themselves more of a supernatural fantasy kind of vibe to them, right? So that's kind of what I mean. It's really a superhero story, but it presents itself as a supernatural urban fantasy type story, which coming from Sui Ishida makes sense because his previous work were vampire urban fantasy type stories, right? So yeah, it does not have an adaptation yet, and I think it will eventually have one. I think that this is definitely something that is poised to have one. I mean, it's by a creator that's very well known, who did a series that was very well received, and anime really is booming right now, and things that are kind of in this vein are pretty popular all the time, right? So I think that the reason why it hasn't gotten one yet, when things like Kaiju number 8 or other series like that got anime really quickly, is probably for two reasons. One, there hasn't been as much popularity for Choujin X as maybe some of those other series that I mentioned, but also Sui Ishida is doing this at his own pace. Whenever he feels like releasing an episode of the series, he releases one. And so there is a certain level of uncertainty that comes with this sort of publishing, initiative. And so I assume that the manga company doesn't want to sell the rights, or maybe has sold the rights to the anime for the series already, but the anime company has not decided that it's worth the effort to do so, because they might end up in a situation where the series maybe goes on a long hiatus, and then they wasted a lot of resources on the series that maybe never gets an end, right? And so I think that's maybe what is going on here. It's just not a safe bet. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but from an outsider perspective, that feels like a pretty reasonable reason why that would be happening, right? But I think that it will really pop off once it gets an anime adaptation, because it's pretty good and it's a fairly accessible story for just about everyone, right? So yeah, and the rating for this first arc is a 5 out of 5. I think it's a phenomenal story, but I did have some very light issues with reading through it initially, and that was because the second chapter in the physical edition is incorrect. It's not the right version of the chapter. If you read it on the manga app, on the Shonen Jump app, you will get the right version, and then the story will make a lot more sense, and that will be a much better reading experience. But I got these physically for my birthday from a friend, and so that's how I was reading it, and I was very confused with the second chapter, and so I read it on the app just to make sure I wasn't crazy, and the app showed me that there was a better version of the chapter. I'm not really sure why it's not available in the physical edition. Hopefully in the second edition printing it will, but I'm not sure if that's the case, right? But if I ignore that issue, this first arc is a 5 out of 5. I think it's really phenomenal. So the premise of Choujin number X is basically humanity and the nations of humanity have been fractured because of the emergence of these superhuman characters known as Choujin, who are running amok. Some of them have moral aptitude to them, and so they decide to protect humanity. and quite a few of them decide that they are better off doing whatever they feel like, and so they end up harming humanity. And apparently there was some sort of apocalyptic kind of event that happened with the emergence of these characters. Now everything's kind of in a more standard kind of like balance, but these characters still kind of cause issues from time to time, right? And we follow a few characters here, mostly Tokyo Kurihara, who becomes a Choujin, and this changes his life, hopefully for the better, but it's kind of unclear still if that's the case or not. And we also follow a girl named Ellie Ota, who joins him on this journey of self-discovery through the fact that they have powers in this time period of their lives, which is puberty, right? So it's a very kind of classically set up story. It's pretty good, and I'm looking forward to reading more of it. I do have the first 5 volumes, so I'm pretty excited about that. And the plot line for the story actually opens up on Ellie Ota, who's on a plane. She's actually from a kind of boonies area of what used to be Japan. She's on a plane because she's going to a like a farmer show or something like that. She's going to do something to sell her special tomatoes that she and her family grow, or really her and her grandfather grow. And she's chatting with this old woman when a Choujin appears and he attacks. And it turns out that he is a smoke man, kind of like Smoker from One Piece, whose name is Hume, or Hume, I guess. He has like a Indian first name, so I'm not really sure how you're supposed to say his last name, but it is spelled Hume, Hume, and he causes the plane to explode, essentially, and so it crashes down. And it crashes down in the area where Tokyo lives. He sees the plane crash during the day as he's sitting in school, kind of, dazing off, not really paying attention. And then this is when we start focusing on him, who is a bit of an aimless loser who somehow ended up being best friends with the school's, like, super popular kid. Tokyo is a tall and lanky character, whereas Asuma Higashi, who is that cool kid, is a small, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's built, but like much more athletic kind of looking person than Tokyo. And he is small and golden haired, and so he's like a lion, and Tokyo would be the vulture that kind of hangs out around him, waiting for Asuma's success to fall down onto him, right? Kind of like a social carrion, I guess is what you could call it. And they end up beating up a thug after school. When Tokyo finds this man harassing this woman, he calls Azuma, and then Azuma and him beat up this guy. And later that night, this thug, ends up getting given a drug to turn him into a kaiju, to turn him into a Choujin. And when it does, he gets stretchy powers, but he calls himself a mollusk Choujin, which I'm not really sure if that's correct. Maybe that's a mistranslation or something, because his powers don't turn him into a shellfish. His powers just give him stretchiness, right? Particularly from his head, I guess. So maybe that's what it means. It's kind of like a geoduck or something like that. I'm not really sure. But Tokyo and Azuma go off to explore with a plane crash when suddenly they are attacked by this thug that recently turned into a Choujin, who has elastic powers. He goes berserk, and the characters, the boys, decide that they're going to die. But they found 2 other applications of this drug laying around because this thug had them with him because he was going to give it to his friends, right? And they decide that if they don't take it, they'll die. So they'll risk turning into monsters in order to survive the night. And they do. And, well, it seems like nothing happens to Azuma, but Tokyo becomes a vulture man, and a really ugly looking one at that. And that's kind of what this is supposed to be showing you here. Let's see if there's a better picture of that. Something like this, right? And he ends up saving Azuma, thankfully. But Azuma gets scared for him and I guess for himself. And he basically gets angry at the situation and kind of shuns Tokyo for a while. At the same time this is happening, we transition over to chapter 2, where we see that Ellie wakes up at a factory setting of some sort. She's found by Hume, and then she runs. She jumps on a scooter. She's chased around town. She jumps off a cliff. She ends up interacting with these people that have goat heads, or sheep heads, I guess is really what they have. And she gets on a tractor. She runs off. She continues to be chased around by these people. And when she has a standoff with Hume, who's a bit of a piece of shit, as he's going to kill everyone around her, a man comes to save her, right? And throughout the interaction and the chase, she actually also ends up saving the sheep people, and so they owe her a favor, which comes into play later. And the guy that saved her turns out to be Hoshi Sandik, who is a Choujin protector. And he's kind of like an All Might type character. He has a massive big chin, he's blonde haired, he's big and muscular, and he is like your superhero character, right? He is the guy that has a lot of moral fiber, who wants to save the world using his powers, and he thinks that others should do the same. And so hopefully he will be a mentor character to Tokyo and Ellie throughout the story, right? To end this kind of situation here, we see Ellie and Tokyo sitting by themselves, dealing with the struggles of their new reality as Choujin, because Ellie got the smoke powers from Hume for some reason. It's kind of unclear, but basically it seems like she got hurt, and because she came into contact with the powers of Hume as she was hurt, she ended up absorbing them as well, and so she ends up having his powers too. It's almost like Rogue from X-Men, I think. For whatever reason, she was able to absorb these powers, but it's unclear if they're hers for life or if they might go away at some point. It's kind of, I'm not sure. Whereas Tokyo's struggling with the fact that he is now a vulture man and he can't transform back into human, and he'll have to figure that out before he can continue to have a normal life, right? We come back to Tokyo at this moment. We see what happened to him at the end of the battle. Basically, he managed to get Azuma out of the way. He saved his friend, basically the first time he's ever done that. And Azuma is disgusted with him because the world will hate them now that they are monsters. And so he must go back to being human and hide his nature. And Tokyo isn't quite sure how to do that. Azuma stays at home for a few days. Tokyo doesn't know what to do. He can't go to school because he looks like a monster. And so he tries to turn to Azuma. He gets ignored by him and then sneaks away to go see him in person when Azuma gets mad at him. He's angry at the fact that Tokyo is asking for help in a situation that he doesn't know how to deal with. And he tells him, you have to go learn how to do things for yourself for once. It's weird to always depend on me to give you the answers. And that's true, but also it seems like a weird heel turn for Azuma, who basically fostered this relationship between him and himself and Tokyo in this way, where he was the guy with all the answers and Tokyo was his loyal, like, squire character, right? But it's whatever. I guess it will become relevant much later in the story, right? Elsewhere, we see that the thug that attacked them gets killed, and that the bad guys that killed them are looking for Tokyo because something about him is special. It's kind of unclear what. I assume there's a certain level of strength that comes to his that comes with Tokyo's powers that is kind of hidden in some way, right? And well, Tokyo is lost in the memories. He's kind of directionless and he doesn't know what he's doing. When he finally hears someone talking to him, and it turns out that they're the pigeons that he has been feeding for a long time in his life, right? And he's telling them what's going on, and it doesn't really work out. But the pigeons help him understand that maybe he can work through this process by asking himself, what would Azuma do, right? And so he follows Azuma's advice, or what he thinks Azuma would tell him as advice, and he goes off to a zoo where he first saw a vulture for the first time in his life, right? And he goes there, and the vulture is gone, it's not there, and so he's just kind of chilling there when he's found by this female character called Nari, who happens to be a snake Choujin, and she seems to try to help him at first to either find the vulture or find something else in the zoo, and then she is going to try to eat him. He runs away, she chases him, she transforms into this Naga form, half snake, half woman, and then tries to get him to show his powers off, right? But he can't because he doesn't know how to control them yet. and she catches him. And as she's about to kill him, after catching him twice and letting him go, on the third time he calls for help. And as she's about to eat him, Ellie arrives, right? And Ellie has the snow powers like I mentioned before, and so she helps him, but Nari is a bit too strong for them at this point because she has more experience in them, right? She goes full beast. She turns into this giant snake with human teeth, which is really nasty, and she is about to beat the shit out of them when Tokyo decides that he can also try to go full beast. And so he manages to do it. Looks really, really cool. He doesn't actually turn into a giant bird. He turns into like a Birdman, maybe like a Thanagarian or something like that, like a Hawkman kind of character. But it's kind of unclear, like what he looks like isn't super detailed just yet, right? And they manage to attack her well once, and then when they try again it doesn't work, so he flies off with Ellie because they can't beat her. They try to work together in order to try to burn through her scales, or at least burn her from the inside, but they can't use their powers anymore because they're tired. And then as all seems lost, they are saved by another character who shows up called Simon, who is a sword Choujin. He takes them to this place called Yamato Mori, which is a Choujin institution, kind of like the X-Mansion. And they learn the basics of Choujin classification. Basically, there's 3 types of Choujin. There's your human-animal hybrid type Choujin, which is like a zone fruit. There's your elemental type Choujin, like Hume, which is like your Logia fruits, right? And then you have everything else, which is basically your Paramecia types, right? So the elastic powered one should be like the Paramecia type. Hume is of course a Logia type, and Tokyo himself is a zone type, right? But they don't have these names. I'm just using the One Piece terminology because it's the same stuff. But there's also kind of Choujin that are good, Choujin that are bad, and within the Yamato Mori organization, there are levels to the Choujin. They have different license classes, and depending on what license you have, you can use your powers in different situations, right? So it also has a little bit of that My Hero Academia, like quirk-esque kind of thing. And they're given a test, and this test is like a moral issue test. So they're asked, what's good, what's bad, who are your allies, who are your enemies, and Tokyo's answers are very generic. He doesn't know, right? And Ellie has a much clearer understanding of what it is and what she's being asked, and because she has more of a real personality or like an understanding of herself much better than Tokyo does, she can answer the questions better, right? They ask about dreams, and Tokyo really is stumped by this question. He doesn't know what he wants in his life, and so he has no answer for it. And then Ellie and he talk, and he just feels worse after his talk with Ellie because he realizes that he doesn't know anything about himself, right? And then at the end, a pair of Choujin appear. One of them seems to have paper powers, like Conan from Naruto. Is that her name? The girl that's always with Pain. I can't remember her name right now. And an octopus Choujin, who of course looks like Cthulhu. And this reminded me a little bit of the characters in Eden Zero. So that was pretty cool. I like that a lot. And that's basically it for the story. It seems like after this, the Papercraft and Octopus Choujin are going to go try to hunt down Tokyo and Ellie, and that'll be pretty cool, right? In terms of characters, we have Tokyo Kurohara and Eliota, who are the main characters. We have Azuma, who's initially portrayed as a secondary protagonist, but then doesn't end up being relevant in this arc or the next. So that's kind of weird. Then you have Hume Chandra, who is basically your initial villain character. We have Hoshi Sandek, who's a mentor character. We have No Mask, who is the guy giving out the Choujin drugs. And we have Nari Tsumuji, who's the snake lady. And I wasn't really interested in the story all that much until the snake lady shows up, partially because, the way that she's drawn is awesome, but also because that added the conflict I needed in the story for me to get hooked, and the evolution of the artwork throughout the few chapters and getting that awesome action sequence really, you know, livened up the story for me. And then I got hooked on the world building aspect, right? So the world building is kind of interesting. It's not very clear, but it's pretty enjoyable. So it's set in a post-societal collapse of some sort. Humans exist, mutant people exist as well, and they're called Choujin. They seem to have varied powers, kind of like devil fruits, which I already explained. And the Choujin are like X-Men. They're characters that all share the same basic power source, which is some sort of lineage based power. All their powers are different, although they kind of fall under some sort of classification. And because ultimately these are just people with extra abilities, they fall into a load of categories, but because of the story, end up kind of aligning into either hero or villain factions. The humanity around them, the people around them, have a negative view of them because they don't understand them, right? So there is like a Choujin menace kind of subplot going on throughout the story, right? And your good guys are the Yamato Mori, and the bad faction doesn't currently have a name, but I assume that they will eventually. And the animal Choujin can do something called full beastification, which allows them to turn into an animal of disproportionate size, right? So very cool. They basically turn into animagus or whatever, you know, other shapeshifter terms you want to use. And their size isn't necessarily directly correlated to the animal or their own size, right? So the snake girl turns into a giant snake, even though she's a pretty small woman, right? And in terms of artwork and fan service, I think the artwork is great. It has a bit more of a cartoony style than Sui Ishida's other work, but it's very, very badass. The artwork is awesome. It has a nice sort of scratchy vibe, but not so scratchy it looks bad. It has some good action sequences. And although some of the blocking sometimes is unclear and makes it hard to understand what's going on, it is, broadly speaking, very, very enjoyable most of the time, right? And there's a little bit of fan service here and there with some of the character designs, but not necessarily anything too serious, right? There's not going to be like a pervert character showing up in any of these types of stories so far, so we'll see how that changes throughout the story, right? And the Nari Samuji character is very, very attractive. It was drawn very, very wonderfully, right? In terms of rating, it was a 5 out of 5 for me, but I did have two small issues. One of them was the one I already mentioned, which is that the volume doesn't have the best version of Chapter 2 available in it, and it's kind of weird because it's available on the app. Now, I don't know why this happened. I assume that because Shishida can do whatever he wants with the series, he made an original issue, and then he decided to change it, and then it happened after the comic was printed already, and so they're not going to be able to fix it in this first edition, but they will be able to fix it in future printings. Hopefully this is what happens, but I'm not really sure. And there was another issue that I noticed, which is translation inconsistencies. And I know that this one is definitely directly related to the fact that Shueisha releases this whenever he feels like, because Viz has like a set of translators, and whichever one of them is available at the time, it translates the issue that comes out most recently, right? And so they all kind of translate things differently, and there's no like overview editor who makes sure everything stays consistent, right? And so like Hoshi Sandek, his name was spelled a bunch of different ways, right? It was spelled S-A-N-D-A-K, S-A-N-D-A-Q, S-A-N-D-E-K, and that was in the first like 3 or 4 chapters, and that is way too many different ways to translate the same name. And so I didn't really notice those inconsistencies in the volume, but I did notice it while I was reading through the digital edition, which is really weird. But there are some slight inconsistencies with that sort of stuff, right? So if you're going to be someone that's going to be pretty upset about those, maybe watch out for that. I would normally be pretty upset about them if I had bought the book with my own money, but since this was a gift to me and I didn't have to spend money on it, I don't really mind those sort of problems. I think that they shouldn't exist, and I don't like that they do, and they should fix that as soon as possible. But at the same time, I don't have the attachment to quality control that I normally do when I buy something with my own money, right? So there you go. Those are my thoughts on that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you've read this series before, let me know what you think about it. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Is it better than the other series, what's it called? Tokyo Ghoul. Is it better than Tokyo Ghoul? Because I read the first volume of Tokyo Ghoul and I thought it was atrocious. I was not going to read that, and I never did, and I'm happy about that. But reading through this first volume, I actually really enjoyed it by the end of it, and I was pretty hyped about it. But I don't know if there's really much worth getting out of going back and reading Tokyo Ghoul. I'm pretty sure I won't enjoy it, so I wouldn't do so even if people recommend that I do. But I want to know what the differences are, right? Like, I know this is obviously his second or third series, depending on how you look at Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re. And so he's done a lot of growth as a creator, right? But is it worth going back to see his older work? I probably think the answer is probably not. Probably no, but we'll see. What do you guys think down below? Let me know in the comments. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.